Have you ever wondered why some of America's quickest recipes simply disappeared? Long before drive-thrus and frozen dinners, families relied on simple meals that could be on the table in 10 minutes or less. These were the recipes tucked inside faded community cookbooks, handwritten recipe cards, and well-worn kitchen drawers. They rescued busy mothers on hectic afternoons, filled hungry children after school, and turned a few inexpensive pantry staples into comforting meals that brought families together. But somewhere along the way, these remarkable little recipes vanished. They were replaced by modern convenience foods, and the old cookbook favorites quietly faded into history. Today, most people have never even heard of them. In this video, we are opening the pages of vintage American cookbooks to uncover 15 forgotten 10-minute recipes that once filled millions of kitchens across the country. Some will surprise you, some may sound wonderfully strange, and a few might make you wonder why we ever stopped making them. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, which old family recipe do you still remember from your childhood? Now, let us travel back to a time when 10 minutes, a handful of simple ingredients, and a little creativity were all it took to put something unforgettable on the table. Cottage cheese and chive toast. Long before avocado toast became a breakfast trend, millions of American families started their mornings with something even simpler. Hidden inside church cookbooks and community recipe collections from the 1940s and 1950s was a humble dish called cottage cheese and chive toast. It was inexpensive, satisfying, and could be prepared in less than 10 minutes, making it a favorite for busy households. The recipe could not have been easier. A slice of freshly toasted white or whole wheat bread was spread with a generous layer of creamy cottage cheese. Fresh snipped chives were sprinkled over the top, followed by a pinch of black pepper and a light dusting of paprika. Some homemakers added a thin tomato slice or a few cucumber rounds when gardens were in season, but the classic version remained wonderfully simple. This quick meal became especially popular after World War II, when families looked for nutritious dishes that stretched grocery budgets without sacrificing flavor. Cottage cheese was widely promoted in magazines and home economics booklets because it was affordable, rich in protein, and readily available in neighborhood dairies. Mothers appreciated that the recipe required no cooking beyond toasting the bread, while children loved its creamy texture and mild flavor. Although it rarely appears on modern breakfast tables, cottage cheese and chive toast represented everything that defined mid-century American home cooking. It was practical, wholesome, and proof that a satisfying meal did not require expensive ingredients or hours in the kitchen. Today, this forgotten recipe has nearly vanished from America's kitchens, surviving mostly in faded cookbook pages and handwritten family recipe cards. Yet one bite still captures the comforting simplicity of a time when breakfast was made with whatever was fresh, affordable, and close at hand. Sometimes the quickest meals are the ones that leave the longest memories. Creamed chipped beef on toast. Long before breakfast sandwiches filled drive-through menus, there was one quick meal that almost every American family recognized the moment it reached the table. Creamed chipped beef on toast, affectionately nicknamed SOS by generations of military servicemen, was a 10-minute recipe that became a household favorite during the 1940s and 1950s. The dish began with thin slices of dried chipped beef, a pantry staple that required no refrigeration and stayed fresh for months. The beef was chopped into small pieces and gently warmed in butter before flour and milk were stirred in to create a smooth, creamy sauce. Within minutes, the mixture thickened into a rich gravy that was poured generously over slices of crisp toasted bread. A dash of black pepper was often the only seasoning it needed. Its popularity grew during World War II because chipped beef was inexpensive, easy to store, and readily available. After the war, countless veterans brought the recipe home, where it quickly found a place in family cookbooks and community recipe collections. Busy mothers appreciated how little preparation it required, while fathers recognized the familiar meal they had eaten during their years of service. Even children enjoyed its warm, creamy texture on cold mornings. Despite its humble ingredients, creamed chipped beef on toast represented something much larger than convenience. It reflected an era when families believed a hot homemade meal, no matter how simple, could bring everyone together around the kitchen table. It was filling, economical, and dependable during times when every grocery dollar mattered. Today, this once famous recipe has nearly disappeared from modern kitchens, replaced by frozen breakfasts and fast food. Yet hidden inside countless vintage cookbooks, it remains a reminder that some of America's fastest meals also carried the richest stories, proving that comfort sometimes arrived on nothing more than a slice of warm toast. Egg in a whole toast. Long before breakfast sandwiches became a morning routine, American families had a clever little recipe that transformed an ordinary slice of bread into a hot, satisfying meal in less than 10 minutes. Known by names like Egg in a Hole, One-Eyed Jack, or Toad in the Hole, this simple breakfast appeared in countless home cookbooks from the 1940s through the 1960s, earning a permanent place in kitchens across the country. The recipe began with a thick slice of bread. A small circle was cut from the center using the rim of a glass or a biscuit cutter. The bread was placed into a hot buttered skillet, and an egg was cracked directly into the opening. As the bread turned crisp and golden, the egg gently cooked in the middle, creating a breakfast that looked far more special than the few ingredients used to make it. The little round piece of bread was never wasted either. It was toasted alongside the larger slice and used for dipping into the soft yolk. This recipe became especially popular after World War II, when families searched for filling breakfasts that required only pantry staples. Eggs were affordable, bread was always available, and butter added just enough richness to make the meal feel comforting. Busy parents appreciated that everything cooked in one pan, leaving little cleanup before the day's work began. For many children, egg in a whole toast was more than breakfast. Watching an egg cook neatly inside a slice of bread felt almost magical, making ordinary mornings seem a little more exciting. It proved that creativity often mattered more than expensive ingredients. Although it still appears occasionally in family kitchens, this once famous recipe has quietly disappeared from many modern breakfast tables. Yet every golden slice reminds us that some of America's quickest meals were also its most memorable, turning everyday ingredients into traditions that families passed from one generation to the next. Tomato gravy over biscuits. Before breakfast sandwiches and frozen hash browns filled American kitchens, there was a humble Southern favorite that could turn a handful of pantry staples into a warm, comforting meal in just 10 minutes. Tomato gravy over biscuits appeared in countless family cookbooks throughout the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s, especially in rural communities where wasting food was simply not an option. The recipe usually began with butter or bacon drippings melted in a skillet. A little flour was stirred in to create a smooth roux before canned tomatoes or leftover stewed tomatoes were added. As the mixture simmered, it thickened into a rich, velvety gravy seasoned with salt, black pepper, and sometimes a pinch of sugar to balance the tomato's natural acidity. Once finished, the hot gravy was spooned generously over freshly baked or leftover biscuits, creating a filling meal that could be prepared almost entirely from ingredients already sitting in the pantry. During the years following the Great Depression, recipes like this became household essentials. Fresh meat was not always available, but canned tomatoes, flour, and biscuits could usually be found in nearly every kitchen. Homemakers relied on simple recipes that were inexpensive, quick to prepare, and hearty enough to satisfy hungry families before a long day of work. For many Americans, tomato gravy over biscuits became more than a budget meal. The rich aroma drifting from the skillet signaled that breakfast, or sometimes even supper, was almost ready. Children eagerly tore open warm biscuits while parents gathered around the table, grateful that a comforting homemade meal could come together so quickly. Today, this once-beloved recipe has quietly faded from most modern cookbooks. Yet in many Southern families, its comforting flavor still brings back memories of farmhouse kitchens, cast-iron skillets, and a time when simple ingredients created meals that no one ever forgot. Cornmeal mush fried in butter. Long before boxed breakfast cereals became a daily habit, one of America's quickest morning meals came from a pot of leftover cornmeal mush. Found in farmhouse cookbooks and family recipe collections from the early 1900s through the 1950s, this simple dish turned yesterday's leftovers into a hot, golden breakfast in less than 10 minutes. The process began the night before by cooking cornmeal with water, a little salt, and sometimes milk until it thickened into a smooth porridge. Once cooled, it became firm enough to slice. The next morning, Thick pieces were cut from the loaf and placed into a hot cast iron skillet with butter or bacon drippings. Within minutes, each slice developed a crisp, golden crust while remaining soft and creamy inside. Some families served it with maple syrup, molasses, or honey for a sweet breakfast, while others preferred butter and black pepper for a savory meal. Cornmeal was one of the most affordable pantry staples available, especially during the Great Depression and the difficult years of World War II. Rural families valued recipes that stretched inexpensive ingredients without sacrificing a warm, filling breakfast. Since the mush had already been prepared the day before, frying it required almost no effort, making it perfect for busy mornings before school or work. Children loved the contrast between the crunchy outside and the tender center, while parents appreciated that nothing went to waste. Leftovers were not seen as second-best meals but as opportunities to create something completely new with very little time or expense. Today, fried cornmeal mush survives in only a handful of regional diners and family kitchens, but it was once a breakfast tradition enjoyed across much of America. Every crispy slice reminds us of a generation that believed good cooking was not about expensive ingredients but about resourcefulness, patience, and finding comfort in the simplest foods. Creamed peas on toast. Long before frozen breakfast sandwiches and instant meals filled grocery store freezers, one of America's fastest comfort foods was creamed peas on toast. This humble recipe appeared in countless home economics books and community cookbooks throughout the 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s. It was quick, affordable, and comforting enough to earn a permanent place on countless family dinner tables. The recipe was wonderfully simple. A saucepan was placed over medium heat, where butter was melted before a little flour was stirred in to create a smooth base. Milk was slowly added, forming a creamy white sauce. Then came a cup of sweet green peas, either fresh when gardens were thriving or canned during the colder months. After just a few minutes of gentle stirring, the rich mixture was spooned generously over slices of warm toasted bread. A pinch of black pepper and a little parsley were often all that was needed to finish the dish. During the years after World War II, this recipe became a favorite because it transformed inexpensive pantry ingredients into a filling meal without requiring much time. Busy mothers could have lunch or supper ready before children returned from school, while working families appreciated a warm homemade dish that cost very little to prepare. It was also an excellent way to use leftover milk and canned vegetables that almost every household kept on hand. Although its ingredients were modest, creamed peas on toast represented something much greater than convenience. It reflected an era when homemade meals did not have to be complicated to feel comforting. The creamy sauce, crisp toast, and naturally sweet peas created a combination that generations of Americans remembered with affection. Today, this once popular recipe has quietly disappeared from most modern kitchens, replaced by packaged convenience foods. Yet hidden inside faded vintage cookbooks, creamed peas on toast remains a delicious reminder that some of the quickest meals were also the ones that brought the greatest comfort around the family table. Sardine salad sandwiches. Long before tuna salad became the lunchbox favorite, sardine salad sandwiches were a quick and dependable meal found in kitchens across America. Throughout the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s, these inexpensive little fish appeared in countless pantry cupboards because they were affordable, packed with protein, and required no cooking at all. When time was short, few recipes could compete with their speed. Preparing the sandwich took only a few minutes. A small tin of sardines was drained and gently mashed with a fork before being mixed with a spoonful of mayonnaise, a squeeze of lemon juice, and a little chopped celery or onion if available. A pinch of black pepper added just enough seasoning without overpowering the fish. The creamy mixture was spread generously onto slices of soft white bread, sometimes topped with crisp lettuce or thin tomato slices before being served immediately. During the years of the Great Depression and the rationing of World War II, canned seafood became an important source of nutrition for many American families. Sardines were inexpensive, shelf-stable, and easy to keep on hand for unexpected meals. Homemakers appreciated that lunch could be prepared in less than 10 minutes without lighting the stove, making it especially useful during hot summer afternoons. For many children, these sandwiches appeared in lunch pails wrapped neatly in wax paper, while adults enjoyed them with a bowl of soup or a handful of potato chips. Although the flavor was stronger than many modern sandwiches, families valued the recipe because it was practical, nourishing, and stretched a modest grocery budget. Today, sardine salad sandwiches have largely disappeared from American lunch tables, overshadowed by more familiar fillings. Yet inside vintage cookbooks and handwritten family recipe cards, this forgotten favorite still reminds us of a generation that believed simple pantry ingredients could become satisfying meals with just a little creativity and a few quiet minutes in the kitchen. Apple butter and cottage cheese crackers. Long before packaged snack packs filled grocery store shelves, families across America relied on simple pantry ingredients to create quick afternoon bites. One forgotten favorite that appeared in church cookbooks and community recipe collections throughout the 1940s and 1950s was apple butter and cottage cheese crackers. It was a sweet and savory snack that could be assembled in less than 10 minutes and required no cooking at all. The recipe started with crisp soda crackers or buttery round crackers arranged neatly on a plate. Each cracker received a spoonful of creamy cottage cheese before being topped with a small dollop of rich apple butter. Some homemakers added a light sprinkle of cinnamon or crushed walnuts for extra flavor, while others left the recipe exactly as it appeared in the old cookbooks. The combination of smooth cottage cheese and deeply spiced apple butter created a balance of sweet, tangy, and creamy flavors that surprised anyone trying it for the first time. This recipe became especially popular after World War II, when home economists encouraged families to serve nutritious snacks using affordable dairy products and homemade fruit preserves. Apple butter was often prepared during the autumn harvest and stored in glass jars throughout the year, while cottage cheese was widely available from local dairies. Together, they created an inexpensive snack that felt both wholesome and satisfying. Children often enjoyed these crackers after returning home from school, while adults served them with coffee during neighborhood visits or church gatherings. The recipe required almost no preparation, making it perfect for busy afternoons when time was limited but guests could arrive without warning. Today, apple butter and cottage cheese crackers have nearly disappeared from modern kitchens, replaced by processed snack foods and individually wrapped treats. Yet hidden inside faded recipe booklets and handwritten family collections, this forgotten combination remains a reminder that some of America's most comforting snacks were also the quickest, proving that simple ingredients could create lasting memories in only a few minutes. Ham and mustard pinwheel sandwiches. Long before grocery stores sold ready-made party trays, American homemakers had a simple recipe they could prepare in just a few minutes whenever guests stopped by unexpectedly. Ham and mustard pinwheel sandwiches appeared in countless church cookbooks, ladies' club recipe collections, and homemaking magazines throughout the 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s. They looked elegant, tasted delicious, and required almost no cooking at all. The recipe began with slices of soft white bread, carefully trimmed to remove the crusts before being flattened with a rolling pin. A thin layer of butter was spread across the bread, followed by a touch of yellow mustard and several thin slices of deli ham. The bread was then rolled tightly into a log, wrapped for a few minutes to hold its shape, and sliced into neat little pinwheels. Some families added chopped parsley, sweet pickle relish, or a slice of mild cheese, but the classic version remained wonderfully simple. These sandwiches became popular because they were inexpensive, attractive, and incredibly quick to prepare. During the post-war years, entertaining at home became a regular part of American life. Bridge clubs, church socials, birthday celebrations, and neighborhood coffee gatherings often featured trays filled with colorful finger foods. Ham pinwheels offered hosts a recipe that looked impressive without requiring hours in the kitchen. Children loved their bite-sized shape, while adults appreciated how easy they were to serve alongside pickles, olives, or fresh vegetables. Their soft texture and tangy flavor made them one of the first snacks to disappear from every serving platter. Today, ham and mustard pinwheel sandwiches are rarely seen outside vintage cookbooks and family reunions. Modern party foods may be more elaborate, but few can match the charm of these simple little rolls. They remind us of a time when hospitality was measured not by expensive ingredients, but by the warmth of welcoming friends with something homemade, thoughtful, and ready in just a few minutes. Creamed tuna on toast. Long before canned tuna became the star of lunchtime sandwiches, one of America's quickest comfort meals was creamed tuna on toast. Found in family cookbooks, church recipe collections, and home economics manuals throughout the 1940s, 1950s, and early 1960s, this simple dish turned a single can of tuna into a warm, satisfying meal in less than 10 minutes. The recipe began with butter gently melted in a saucepan. A spoonful of flour was whisked into the butter before milk was slowly poured in, creating a smooth, creamy white sauce. Once the mixture thickened, a can of flaked tuna was folded into the sauce along with a pinch of black pepper. Some homemakers added chopped parsley, diced pimentos, or a few frozen peas for extra color, but the traditional version remained wonderfully uncomplicated. The creamy tuna was then ladled generously over crisp slices of toasted bread and served while still piping hot. This recipe became especially popular after World War II because canned tuna was affordable, shelf-stable, and available in nearly every grocery store. Families appreciated meals that could be prepared quickly without sacrificing nutrition. Busy mothers often served creamed tuna on toast for lunch, while many households enjoyed it as a light supper alongside sliced tomatoes or a simple green salad. Beyond its convenience, the recipe reflected an era when resourcefulness shaped everyday cooking. With only a handful of pantry ingredients, families could create a meal that was filling, comforting, and suitable for everyone gathered around the table. It proved that simple ingredients, prepared with care, could become something memorable. Today, creamed tuna on toast has largely disappeared from modern menus, replaced by frozen dinners and ready-made convenience foods. Yet within the pages of vintage American cookbooks, it remains a forgotten classic, reminding us that some of the fastest meals carried the greatest warmth, bringing families together one comforting bite at a time. Deviled ham and pickle crackers. Long before packaged snack trays became a supermarket staple, American families knew how to create flavorful appetizers with little more than a few pantry ingredients. One forgotten favorite found in community cookbooks and homemaking magazines throughout the 1940s and 1950s was deviled ham and pickle crackers. Ready in less than 10 minutes, these savory little bites became a popular choice for afternoon gatherings, holiday parties, and weekend visits from neighbors. The recipe was wonderfully straightforward. Crisp round crackers were arranged on a serving plate before being topped with a thin layer of deviled ham spread. A small slice of dill pickle was placed on each cracker, adding a cool crunch that balanced the rich, seasoned meat. Some homemakers finished the snack with a sprinkle of paprika or chopped parsley, while others added a tiny cube of cheddar cheese for extra flavor. Despite these variations, the original recipe remained simple enough for anyone to prepare in just a few minutes. During the years following World War II, canned spreads became common kitchen staples because they were affordable, convenient, and required no refrigeration until opened. Busy homemakers appreciated recipes that allowed them to prepare attractive appetizers without spending hours in the kitchen. These crackers often appeared on serving trays beside stuffed celery, cheese cubes, and olives during bridge clubs, church socials, and family celebrations. Their popularity came from more than convenience alone. Every bite combined creamy, tangy, salty, and crisp textures, creating a snack that felt surprisingly elegant despite its humble ingredients. Guests often reached for seconds before the tray had even made its way around the room. Today, deviled ham and pickle crackers have nearly vanished from modern party tables, replaced by elaborate appetizers and catered platters. Yet tucked inside faded cookbook pages and handwritten family recipes, they remain a delicious reminder of a time when hospitality was simple, budgets were modest, and some of America's most memorable snacks could be prepared before the coffee had even finished brewing. Egg salad stuffed tomatoes. Long before refrigerated meal kits and ready-made deli lunches became common, one of America's favorite warm-weather recipes was egg salad stuffed tomatoes. Found in countless church cookbooks, women's club recipe collections, and home economics manuals from the 1940s through the 1960s, this colorful dish could be prepared in less than 10 minutes and was a familiar sight at summer luncheons and family picnics. The recipe began with ripe tomatoes carefully hollowed out using a small spoon, creating the perfect edible bowl. Meanwhile, hard-boiled eggs were chopped and mixed with mayonnaise, a touch of yellow mustard, salt, black pepper, and a little finely diced celery for extra crunch. Some homemakers added sweet pickle relish or fresh chives from the garden, but the classic version relied on only a handful of everyday ingredients. The creamy egg salad was spooned into each tomato until overflowing, then finished with a sprinkle of paprika or fresh parsley for a colorful presentation. This recipe became especially popular after World War II when home gardens flourished across America. During the summer months, families often had more tomatoes than they could use, and creative cooks searched for simple ways to serve them. Egg salad stuffed tomatoes offered a meal that was nutritious, affordable, and refreshing without requiring the stove to stay on during hot afternoons. Beyond its convenience, the dish reflected an era when presentation mattered just as much as flavor. Even modest meals were arranged with care, making everyday lunches feel a little more special. Served alongside crackers, lettuce, or a bowl of fresh fruit, these stuffed tomatoes brought color and freshness to the family table. Today, egg salad stuffed tomatoes have nearly disappeared from modern cookbooks, replaced by packaged salads and fast food lunches. Yet they remain a beautiful reminder of a time when a few fresh ingredients, a little creativity, and 10 quiet minutes in the kitchen could create something both elegant and unforgettable. Welsh rarebit on toast. Long before grilled cheese sandwiches became a lunchtime favorite, many American kitchens served a richer and more flavorful classic known as Welsh rarebit. Although the recipe originated in Britain, it found a loyal following in the United States during the early 20th century and remained a staple in American cookbooks throughout the 1940s and 1950s. Best of all, this comforting meal could be ready in less than 10 minutes. The recipe began by melting butter in a small saucepan before stirring in a generous handful of sharp cheddar cheese. A splash of milk helped create a smooth, velvety sauce, while a little dry mustard and Worcestershire sauce added just enough tang to wake up the flavors. Some homemakers finished it with a pinch of paprika or black pepper. Once the cheese became silky and creamy, it was poured generously over slices of crisp toasted bread and served immediately while still bubbling hot. Welsh rarebit became especially popular because it transformed simple pantry ingredients into a meal that felt surprisingly elegant. During the years following the Great Depression and throughout World War II, families often relied on affordable staples like bread and cheese. This recipe proved that even the most ordinary ingredients could create something warm, filling, and satisfying without spending much money or time in the kitchen. Many families enjoyed Welsh rarebit for lunch, while others served it as a light supper with sliced tomatoes, pickles, or a fresh green salad. It was also a favorite in diners and small cafes, where cooks appreciated how quickly it could be prepared during busy meal hours. Today, Welsh rarebit has largely faded from everyday American menus, overshadowed by simpler cheese toast and grilled sandwiches. Yet inside vintage cookbooks, it remains a forgotten treasure that reminds us how previous generations elevated humble ingredients into memorable meals. Sometimes all it took was melted cheese, warm toast, and 10 quiet minutes to create a dish that people never forgot. Cinnamon sugar fried apples. Long before frozen pastries and toaster breakfasts became everyday conveniences, countless American families welcomed the morning with the comforting aroma of cinnamon sugar fried apples. This quick skillet recipe appeared in farmhouse cookbooks, church recipe collections, and family notebooks throughout the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s. Requiring only a handful of simple ingredients, it could be prepared in less than 10 minutes and filled the kitchen with the unmistakable scent of home. The recipe began with crisp apples peeled and sliced into thin wedges. Butter melted gently in a cast iron skillet before the apples were added and cooked until they softened slightly while still holding their shape. A generous sprinkle of brown sugar and cinnamon followed, coating each slice in a glossy glaze as the butter and sugar melted together. Some families added a pinch of nutmeg or a splash of vanilla, but the traditional version relied on little more than apples, butter, sugar, and spice. Within minutes, the fruit became tender, sweet, and wonderfully fragrant. During the difficult years of the Great Depression and the decades that followed, apples were one of the most dependable fruits found in American kitchens. Families stored them through the colder months, making recipes like this an inexpensive way to create a warm breakfast or simple dessert without needing fancy ingredients. Children often enjoyed the apples spooned over toast, pancakes, or oatmeal, while adults paired them with pork chops or biscuits for supper. More than just a quick recipe, cinnamon sugar-fried apples represented the resourcefulness of home cooks who knew how to transform ordinary pantry staples into something that felt special. The sizzling butter, bubbling sugar, and comforting spices created memories that lingered long after breakfast had ended. Today, this once common skillet favorite has quietly disappeared from many American homes. Yet every warm bite still captures the comforting spirit of old-fashioned kitchens, where 10 minutes and a few humble ingredients were enough to create a meal that everyone eagerly gathered around to enjoy. Creamed eggs on toast. Long before breakfast sandwiches and frozen entrees became everyday conveniences, creamed eggs on toast was one of America's favorite 10-minute meals. Found in church cookbooks, home economics textbooks, and family recipe collections from the 1930s through the 1950s, this comforting dish transformed a few simple ingredients into a warm meal that satisfied hungry families without stretching the household budget. The recipe usually began with hard-boiled eggs, often prepared earlier in the week to save time. The eggs were chopped into bite-sized pieces while butter melted gently in a saucepan. A spoonful of flour was whisked into the butter before warm milk was added, creating a smooth, creamy white sauce. Once the sauce thickened, the chopped eggs were folded in and seasoned with salt, black pepper, and sometimes a pinch of paprika or fresh parsley. The rich mixture was then spooned generously over slices of golden toasted bread, creating a hearty meal that was ready in just a few minutes. This recipe became especially popular during the years surrounding World War II, when families depended on inexpensive ingredients that could feed everyone without much preparation. Eggs were one of the most reliable sources of protein, while bread and milk were staples found in nearly every American kitchen. Homemakers appreciated recipes that used everyday ingredients yet still felt warm and comforting after a long day. Creamed eggs on toast was often served for breakfast, lunch, or even a light supper alongside sliced tomatoes or fresh fruit. Its creamy texture and gentle flavor made it a favorite for both children and adults, proving that simple cooking could still feel satisfying and complete. Today, this once-beloved recipe has quietly disappeared from most modern tables, replaced by packaged breakfasts and fast food options. Yet inside the pages of vintage American cookbooks, creamed eggs on toast remains a timeless reminder that the quickest meals were often the ones made with the greatest care, bringing warmth, comfort, and togetherness to every bite. That brings us to the end of another journey through America's forgotten kitchens. These 15 quick recipes prove that some of the most memorable meals were never the most expensive or the most complicated. They were created with simple pantry staples, a little creativity, and the determination to put something warm on the family table in just a few minutes. Now we would love to hear from you. Which of these forgotten recipes surprised you the most? And is there one your parents or grandparents used to make that we did not mention? Share your memories in the comments below because every family recipe tells a story worth preserving. If you enjoyed rediscovering these lost cookbook treasures, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to America's Lost Recipes. Every week, we uncover more forgotten dishes, vintage cookbooks, and the remarkable food traditions that helped shape generations of American families. Until next time, keep those treasured recipes alive, cherish the stories behind every meal, and remember that sometimes the simplest dishes leave the most lasting memories. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next episode.